everybody, when you start a new job, regardless of how much experience you have, give yourself grace to learn. The principles, again, in the discipline, the principles, there's planning, there's requirements, analysis, design, development, testing, release, and maintenance. That's all going to stay there. How you write a requirement, whether it's, in a Word document.
Yeah, it's nice to have you, and it's nice to finally meet again. So
yes, it is. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I greatly appreciate the offer, and I'm super excited. You asked some very good questions. I'm glad you sent them in advance.
Yeah, these are the questions that I had myself when I started out. It was really brutal. When I started out, I was sent to a project somewhere in Chicago, Illinois, and I didn't have the skill set. So I was dropped from the project on the second or third day, and it was really brutal. I didn't have any money and all that.
Oh my!
10 years ago. That's when I realized there's a lot of folks just like me who want to get into IT, but they don't have the skill set, and it's very hard to find the first job. And if they do find, it's very hard to keep the first job. So I thought maybe I'll devise a training where they learn about all these features, functionalities as opposed to theory. And I have a small YouTube channel. There's around 400 subscribers, close to 400 subscribers.
Nice.
And I get clients, 6 or 7 clients for training. So let me shoot the first question. You can give a formal introduction about yourself, and then you can also answer what inspired you to become a business analyst. So, yeah.
Excellent. I'm super excited to be here. So my name is Connie Cotter, and I kind of stumbled into business analysis, actually. I started my professional career out of college as a research chemist with an organization, and did that for 6 or 7 years. And how I got into, I'll just give you the story how I kind of fell into business analysis. I started with process improvement. So I was a bench chemist analyzing samples for a laboratory, and we had numerous processes, and it just seemed like there would be more efficient ways to do things. And that's how it all really kind of started. And at the time, I didn't know there was Six Sigma for process improvement, or those sorts of formal things. And so being in the lab, I didn't realize, this was back in the early 90s, didn't realize there was these sorts of things. So I started looking for positions where I could use my curiosity and process improvement. And I found a job with an organization that sold a piece of software that did process mapping, process redesign, system development. And so I joined and worked with them, and my title was a consultant and a trainer. So I would train on this piece of software, and I would go to these different consulting assignments, and most of them were for process. And I was like, cool. Well, part of our software was taking these diagrams, these workflow diagrams or these process diagrams, and writing text behind them. And it turned out that the text was requirements. And then the other individuals on my team would then take those requirements and design a solution to help our clients. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I just thought still process development. And then that job had a lot of travel. And so I wanted something a little closer to home, so I could stay home once in a while. And looking at position descriptions, I was looking for process, and what kept coming up was business analysis. So my next assignment or my next job was with another consulting organization as a business analyst. And again, I had no training in business requirements. I learned about the software development lifecycle from, you start with a strategy, you got your requirements, and then you work with someone on design, and then they build it, and then the testing. So I learned that through the different consulting assignments that I had. And I didn't get my first formal training until I went to another organization as a business analyst, and then they brought in it was called Requirements Quest, and it was a foundational business analysis training. And that talked about all of the basic stuff, requirements, how to write different between a user requirement and a functional requirement and non-functional requirements. And what that training did was give me I'm like, oh, so this is what I've been doing. And it kind of, I'm like, oh, I'm a business analyst. And then it just kind of went from there. I had several different jobs. I actually went back to the organization where I was a lab research associate and worked in their IT department. In that organization, I started what we call the community of practice. So all of the business analysts, I got them to work on following the same standards and principles so that everybody wasn't kind of doing their own thing. That was another thing when I joined the organization. Everybody was doing it just slightly different. And the biggest challenge with being a business analyst is there's no one way to do business analysis. I know one of your questions that you sent me later is, analysis is very important. And yeah, there's subtle nuances and we can talk about it a little later, but there's really a science. What is a requirement? What are the different stages of the software development life cycle? What does a business analyst do in those different cycles? But then there's also the art, the communication, the documentation writing, the relationship that you build with your project teams. So yeah, it's so fun because every assignment, every project, even when you're within an organization as an employee, it's always different. And that's what I found to be the most exciting.
True. And yeah, sometimes I feel business analysis is more an art as opposed to a set rules.
Yes. Yeah, it's very much a mindset, I think, in curiosity. Mm-hmm. I've learned over the years never to assume. Mm-hmm. So even though as a business analyst, I think I know what the answer is, mm-hmm. when I'm, walking through a process, like let's say I've seen them give me a process diagram. I still ask the questions. What does this mean? Or what happens between these two steps? Or what is the purpose of this? Because I've been surprised where I think it's one thing and the project team is like, no, it's a little bit different. And I'm like, oh, okay. So as one of my favorite parts is as a business analyst, you don't have to know all the answers, mm-hmm. because you're there to provide clarity, mm-hmm. and to help support the business folks because they're in it day to day, day after day after day. And sometimes they're not aware of everything that they do or why they do everything that they do. And as I always like to think of myself as an outside third party, just be inquisitive. Why are you doing that? Have you thought about doing it a different way? What might that be? And they come up with these answers for process improvement and what they want the systems to ultimately do.
Sounds good. So the next question that I have for you is, so in today's day and age, if someone wants to become a business analyst, then what should they do? Especially if this is going to be their first job. And what should the first couple of steps be?
This one, I was like, oh my gosh, I could literally talk for hours on this. So I'll try to keep it brief. And if I get too long-winded, just let me know. So first of all, like we talked about, it's kind of a mindset. And so business analysis is a discipline, which is an area of study or an area of knowledge. And a business analyst is that job description or that position name. So I prefer to look at getting into the business analysis discipline and not so much what the titles are. If you go on to the IIBA website, under their career resources, they have a graphic that shows all sorts of position descriptions and job titles that fall within business analysis, the discipline. And so the wide open part is what does the business analysis discipline mean? Well, there's the foundational principles, my experiences from the IT world, just so that your listeners and people watching this know, there are business analysts that have nothing to do with technology. That's not my experience. So I'm going to talk from the space of working in a technology and an IT role. So understanding, again, what I'm going to call the science is have a good understanding of the software development lifecycle. So it starts with a strategy or a plan. you get your requirements, design, development, or whether you work with a vendor, and those are, a little bit different in the analysis that you need to do. There's some testing, release, and then there's maintenance and support. And that's just a loop. Everything just keeps flowing essentially through that loop. And then understand the core elements within each of those phases. And I don't know if you are familiar with or have access to the IIBA Business Analysis Body of Knowledge, which is the BA-BOK.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm aware of it.
Yeah. So that is, in my opinion, the industry standard for all of the principles within the discipline. Mm-hmm. However, the BA-BOK doesn't tell you how to apply them. Like, it'll talk about gathering requirements, but it's not going to tell you how to do it. It gives you different ways. Like, you can do one-on-one meetings, you can do workshops, you can do questionnaires, you can do observation. And that's where the art comes in, is you'll get essentially like a toolbox, all of these things that you can use, these different tools, models. And as a BA, you kind of figure out what makes the most sense. And unfortunately, that really just comes with experience. I can give, lots of examples. I guess the biggest thing, in addition to having that understanding of those foundational principles, is gaining confidence in asking questions. And then you also may need to explain those business analysis concepts to people. I approach all of my projects. I'm not a practicing business analyst at this current moment. I'm product manager, but I still use all of the same skills. You ask questions and be open to listening, and then be comfortable with challenging in a good way. Because if it's just the same way over and over and over, then the results are always going to be the same. And over the years, I found out that people like to explain what they do and are very infrequently given the opportunity to explain. So I think one of my superpowers, and I think something that would be very effective for people getting into it, is when you start an assignment or when you get a new job, meet with everybody that you can, people that are on the project, the manager, that next level up, and just be quite open. I've been brought onto this project. I'm a business analyst. Here's what I understand. And then ask them, tell me about your role. What is your involvement going to be on the project? What do you want me to know as I'm starting this role? And you'll get great information from people. And it's all the stuff that they want you to do, all the little information, and you build rapport and relationships really quickly. And that, I think, is the key to being a great business analyst, is knowing which people have the information that you need. Let me see. I'm just quickly looking at my notes here to see if so I think it always starts with process. I've been in situations where they're like, well, we don't really want to talk about process. We just want to build the software. And software is support. You have to have the process in place, and then you want to either build or buy your software to support the process. It's been in many organizations where they buy the software first, and then they're like, how do we implement it? And how do we get it into our tool or into our process? And that's a whole nother thing. But start with process, identify, and then where they want to go. So current, and then into future to be, and then work with your development team or your vendor to determine the best way to solve that problem.
That's great. So this is another question that I get asked a lot. And when I started out, I had an inferiority complex. This was close to a decade ago. I'm not a tech-savvy person. I don't know how to code. I didn't even know the difference between coding and an application like Salesforce. So, and my specialization is in MBA. I was under the impression that, okay, all these computer science kids, they know all these technical stuff, and I'm a business person. And then I don't know that much. I didn't have that much technical knowledge as much as they did. Mm-hmm. But then, so I started out with this inferiority complex, and it helped me because it really made me attentive to what's going on around. But then something that everybody feels when they start applying for a business analyst role is, hey, should I have any technical knowledge? Should I have systems knowledge? And just to elaborate on what I mean by systems knowledge or technical knowledge, I'm talking about, should we know what a web service is, what a microservice is, what an API is, what a batch process or an orchestration process is, what a reporting tool is. So, or what a front end, middle tier, or back end related tools are. So, when we start out, do we need to have that technical knowledge? If yes, how much? So that's the question.
In my opinion, starting out, the answer is no. I didn't learn. I still am confused after 25 years of what an API actually is. I know at a very high level. And when my husband and I actually went through grad school to get our MBAs together, I was 15 years into my business analysis career, learning middle tier, front end, back end. I'm like, I didn't know any of that. And I guess my approach was that those were the people, like the engineers, the development engineers, the quality analysts that did the testing. That was their specialty. My specialty as the business analyst was, I like to think I'm at the center, in the spoke, in the middle of the wheel. And I make the connections for everybody so that business people can talk to me in words and phrases and pictures that they understand. And then I can translate that in the way I understand it, requirements. I've never written a technical requirement because that's not what I know. So I think, if you want to have a leg up when you're starting, having an understanding, like a high level definition or understanding of how middleware and back end and front end, what that means. I think you can get some, with the internet nowadays, I think you can find just some basic overviews of understanding like how a web application works. There's web servers and there's application servers, and they're in the different tiers. But being quite honest, that's about all I know right now, even after 25 years, because I'm not a technical business analyst. Now, if you're looking at roles and position descriptions, it really all depends on what the organization wants. They might want someone to have more technical skills, like be able to write SQL queries, for example. 25 years in the business, never written a SQL query, ever. Never, ever, ever. And I've had many conversations with CEOs or CIOs, chief information officers, directors and vice presidents, where they've said, because we're going to bring in new people on the team, and they're like, well, we need them to have these technical skills. And I'm like, I disagree. Those people then, how do I say this and not, there's a different mindset. Again, like we talked about the mindset before. SQL is a solution. It does something. Business analysts are asking the questions to help find the best solution. And so I think it makes more sense to keep it separate. From a resource perspective, I can see where organizations want it all in one person, so that the person is multifaceted and can do multiple things. So from my pure opinion and from my professional experience, I've never had any of those technical skills required in positions that I've had to do. Now, I have to learn applications. And I did, when I was working for the state of Wisconsin, I did have to learn hexadecimal, which was fun because it's another new thing to learn. Haven't used it since, but in that one assignment, I learned that. And to this day, I can't tell you what I used it for, but I remember I learned how to read it.
Yeah, that's true. Something that I've noticed is I've seen these roles like enterprise portal business analyst or Salesforce business analyst. And I always wondered, initially, of course, what is this SaaS application? What is ERP? What is CRM? And I got an opportunity to lead a team as a project manager. As it was a CRM project, we had to implement Microsoft Dynamics 365. And that's when I kind of learned that it's not as complicated as I thought initially. It's just a ready-made solution that you can customize as opposed to building something from the ground up.
Yep.
So a lot of these technical jargons that you see when you apply for roles, if you really investigate into it, it's not so complex, at least on the high level. It's something that's relatively simple to understand and have maybe some end user expertise, especially on that specific SaaS tool or ERP or CRM tool. Example, Microsoft Dynamics or Salesforce or Zoho. That might help as a BA, but it's not too complex.
Yeah, and that's a great point. So like CRM, so the client relationship or customer relationship management system, having an understanding of what a CRM, like the generic term CRM. Okay, you're going to manage your customers, probably phone numbers, keeping track of when you contacted them. Did you get a client? Did you get a contract with them? How long have they been with you? Whatever, the basic elements. And then there's Salesforce. And then there's, what was the one you just said? Microsoft and Toro. So those are just specific applications that are made to support this broader concept. And there's many organizations like they want SaaS experience because that individual then is going to work exclusively on their SaaS software application. And so that person will likely be focused on enhancements and all the upgrades and keeping maintenance and things like that. If you want to be focused on one application, that's called a specialized business analyst. That's awesome. Some people love that. My preference when I was working at the lab and in the different assignments that I did, I wanted something different. So I wanted to work on different applications. I worked on credit card applications. I worked on university enrollment applications. I worked on department stores when they send out the flyers of, all the stuff that's going to be on sale for July 4th. And that's a generalized business analyst. And so I found that more exciting because you take all the principles of business analysis, and then you just apply them to different environments. So again, it goes into if you're looking for position descriptions and job openings, if they mention specific tools, if you don't have the training, I encourage people to still apply. If you have an understanding of what the systems do, and let's say you've worked in the Tolo, you've got experience in that one, but this one is asking for SaaS CRM. Apply anyway, and then just share your experience or your understanding of using and working in a CRM. It's not the exact same, but if you can make the connection that you understand the concepts, how it's used, and that you're willing to learn SaaS, I say go for it.
Yeah, that sounds good. So next one is, so right now I started out training candidates for business analysis and Scrum Master roles 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So I just started, there was this Facebook group where there was 70,000 people in there or something. I think 2.5 years ago, it was 50,000 plus. And there's so many aspiring BA candidates. It's a BA group and there's more than 50,000 people. I think that's where we met too.
Yes, I think that is where we met. Yes.
I'll see your post and it'll be like, hey, if you have any questions, you can always ask me. And whenever I text you, you always promptly respond. So yeah, and I started posting my training ads there. And then I used to get, I think two years ago, I used to get around 10 to 12 candidates. So that would be like what, $2,400 on one post. So it was, and right now I think there's more trainers and maybe less candidates. I don't know, but I'm not able to get that many leads. But then, so that's how I got into this training business. And I quickly learned that I need to have a product mentality. So that training must be a product and it should serve a need and it should be relevant. So I started going and looking into a lot of other prominent training programs. And I note back then I still had a lot of BA experience. But when I looked into these prominent training programs, I'm not going to take names, something that I found was a good 30 to 35% was just Tableau and Power BI. And then this Excel, which I still understand. Okay, we do use Excel, but then there's 30 to 35% of the syllabus. It's just focused on Tableau and Power BI. And then there's 50 to 60% of it focused on Agile and business analysis. So I couldn't really understand why they want us to learn Tableau and Power BI. And this is not the case for any one prominent program. There's many such organizations or training agencies that I visited. I looked into the syllabus because I wanted to come up with one. So I just wanted to look into theirs for reference and understanding. This was a common theme. And I couldn't get my head around this as to why they want us to learn Tableau and Power BI as a BA. So my question to you is there any relevance? And what's your thoughts on this?
Well, the course essentially is like, I mean, you can make it whatever you want. And so I don't really know, I can't speak specifically, just from, reading the question and totally understanding it. Is the way I would look at that is that there's some connection and there to those products. So it wasn't maybe necessarily, again, I don't know the title and I didn't read the syllabus, but it was a business analysis course focused on gaining training in these data management or data visualization tools, so that you could say, I've been trained in Tableau, or I've been trained in Power BI. But like we just talked about before, they're data visualization tools. I don't even know how many are out there. So if you're looking for specific, I would say that's more of a solution training. And then they probably weave in, when they talked about business, Agile and requirements or business analysis, so you're a BA, how do you use Power BI and Tableau in an Agile project as a business analyst? So I think it was probably going to be more focused on learning the tool rather than learning business analysis.
Understood.
Does that make sense? I'm purely guessing.
Yeah, it does throw more light. But I mean, these two, there's Cognos, there's Crystal Reports, there's so many other visualization tools. I know that many organizations do use Tableau, is really popular. I think maybe Microsoft Power BI comes next, or there is a close competition. I've learned Power BI, and it's interesting tool. So I had this question and I just wanted some light on it. So, and your answer does throw some light. It could be some kind of a data-based BA roles, and then we also want to include Agile and then business analysis also. Maybe it's some kind of a hybrid, heterogeneous package that they want to give their candidates.
Exactly. And there's, so many aspects, like I'd mentioned, versus it's like a wheel. I mean, there's a whole segment of business analysis that focuses just on data. I mean, you can be a data analyst, you can be, and so then these tools like Tableau and Power BI and Crystal Reports and all of those would be very applicable if you wanted to have a focus on data. And again, as people are starting out, which I know is so hard because but you need experience to get the job. And so I think that the most important thing as somebody just really starting out new, or even transitioning in, I'll start with the new, is just being honest with what you know, do your homework, understand the organization. I'm just going to lead into, you had a question about domain knowledge. As a consultant, I didn't have domain knowledge in any of the organizations, like deep domain knowledge, but I worked for a credit card company. Well, I have a credit card, and we were working on back in the day when they sent you your statement in the mail and it had all those little flyers in it. Well, I received those. That was my domain knowledge. I at least had understood the area. Same thing with the department store that was sending the flyers for sales of what's going to be on. I get those in the mail. At the university, I was a student. I had to pay my tuition. So that is domain knowledge. Now, after I've been at when I worked at the lab and I was there for 15 years, well, then I had a lot of domain knowledge in clinical research, in drug development, because I had acquired that over time. If you're transitioning into business analysis, like so you're going from finance or you're going from education or medicine or wherever you're coming from, again, I would encourage people to focus on the concepts and the discipline, and then make the connections not at the specific detail level of domain or like specific systems, because not all organizations are going to have Tableau. Mm-hmm. But if you have Tableau experience and the project is talking about, or the position is talking about data, mm-hmm. you can say, yeah, I've used Tableau and this is what I did, and make those connections on the general level, mm-hmm. leveraging your prior experience. I hope that helps. Helps.
It does. So, and since you did mention about the domain knowledge, I think you did cover this briefly, but you can, if you want, you can also go in depth into it. So I'll just ask that question anyways, because I really want to ask this. So how important is domain knowledge? Because I'm coming from a place where there's vendors, and then so they ask, hey, do you have this? I mean, they only know it by terms. So they only know these things in terms of job roles, because of course that's what they do. They are recruiters or they are vendors. So the very first thing the very first brick that they throw at me is, hey, are you a finance BA? So what does that even mean? There is banking, and then within banking, there is commercial investment. And let's dissect commercial. There is cash processing, credit card, mortgage loan, and you could keep dissecting everything. And I can't have finance knowledge, I mean, the entire finance knowledge, and I can't be a finance BA, quote unquote, right? So that is something, and they'll ask, and this is even more, and this is something else, right? There is this term BFSI, BA. So what does that mean? What's BFSI? Banking, finance, insurance. I think BFS for securities and I for insurance. So that's everything. So that's the ultimate knowledge that yogis might get if they meditate a lot or something like that. So I would be like, I'll ask the vendor, how can I even do this? How can I have knowledge on banking and then securities, insurance? And so that's not even possible. And then they'll be like, yeah, that's the requirements, that's the keyword that's coming up. So I'm coming from that place, and I'm through that. And I think many of our listeners might also go through that maybe in the future, or they've been through that already. So how important is domain knowledge? Number one, for somebody who's applying for roles, and number two, for somebody who's walked into their first business analyst role. And I still remember I worked in some niche domains in the past, and I just went in the very first day. Everybody, there's a daily Scrum call, and I didn't understand a word of what they said in terms of domain, because I was completely new to it. It took me around a month to even figure out what they were talking about. So there's two segments to this, right? So one, folks who are applying for jobs. Two, people who just stepped into the role. And then they are like, oh my God, this is so complicated, which is the very thought that comes to everybody who walks into their first role, especially if the client is banking client. So how important is domain knowledge? And in the case where one doesn't have the domain knowledge, how should he or she acquire it? So that's the question.
That is a great question. First of all, I just want to say to everybody, when you start a new job, regardless of how much experience you have, give yourself grace to learn. I don't think any organization should expect anybody to just jump in and know what's going on. Even if you have experience, like I worked in the lab for many, many years, and I now work in a different lab. There are similarities and there are drastic differences. So one was drug development, the other one is medical device development. Okay, so that's a difference. The high level concepts are similar, and I can make those connections. I've had also this discussion with CIOs, vice presidents, directors, consulting, because we had product or project managers that would like bring us before the assignments, and I would always want to go because I want to ask the questions. And they're like, do you have, for example, like you said, finance, banking, insurance, securities experience? And I said, no, I have an understanding of it. And even if I did have experience in that, your organization, your processes, your systems, and your people are different. And as a business analyst, I can come in with fresh eyes, ask the questions, and come in from a completely neutral and brand new perspective. So I will ask questions. People, why is she asking this question? And I'll tell them why I'm asking. And, it's so that I can, you said this, and then you talked about this. And to me, there should be something in between. Because I'm just thinking of like a process, because I'm trying to get it into my brain to understand. And they're like, oh, okay. And then, yes, you go on those first couple of calls and they start talking and the acronyms start flying and the abbreviations and the jargon and all of that sort of stuff. So every organization has their jargon and their terminology. And my best advice for that is I would keep a notebook and I would write down the words or the terms. In the first month to 6 weeks, I usually didn't ask in the meetings when I heard them because I was new. So I would take those back and I would go search on the organization's intranet, or I'd ask my working partner buddy, onboarding buddy, that sort of thing. Just to build a glossary, I'd ask if the organization has a glossary. Most of them do. I found that most of them have something for what their organization calls things. And then I just make sure that I adopt that language, because you want to speak in the same terms. After I've kind of gotten my feet wet and we're in discussions, like we're doing a requirements discussion or we're doing a process mapping, and people use a term, again, playing humble, almost pretending like I don't know, I ask them, what does this term mean? And nobody has said, well, why are you asking that? Don't you know? Nobody has ever said that to me, ever. They're like, oh, it means this, this, and this. I'm like, oh, okay. And it confirms that it's the same definition that I had in my head. So cool, we're on the same page. Or one person provides an answer and another individual goes, no, that I thought it meant this. Then that is a great opportunity to figure out what is the right terminology for the team, because you want people to be speaking the same language. And again, with multiple domains and all of the experience. So even if you're starting out, this is your first job as a professional, rely on your 18, 20 years prior experience. Have you been shopping? Have you bought gas? Have you bought insurance? Do you go to a bank? Think about your experience as an end user and then just ask the questions. Understood.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And it was also insightful. And now, since you've covered domain knowledge, so I'll move on to our next segment. The next question is related to this domain knowledge. But then this segment is it will have slightly advanced questions. Dissected all the questions into, I just divided the questions into normal or basic. I think I said beginner, and then advanced. So this one is, so this question I'll just start with something that I do in my training program and something that I learned, and then I'll also attach the question to it. So whenever I train candidates on analysis, the very first thing that there's different phases planning, requirements, analysis. I think planning, analysis, requirements, design, testing, deployment, and maintenance and support. So when I cover this analysis topic, the very first thing that I'll tell them is, this is going to be the most important topic in this entire program. And then there is 3 modules. There's waterfall, agile, business analysis for waterfall, Agile for Scrum Masters, and then systems, so there's 3 modules. And I'll say this topic is going to be the most important topic in this entire training program. And in the case where you don't have that domain knowledge, which some clients or many organizations expect you to have or get as soon as possible once you start working there, this is the phase that you can leverage, use, and get that domain knowledge. And so in real time, when I used to work, something that I figured out or devised is, so I do analysis in such a way that I'll just go talk to an end user once they hand me over some work, once they assign me some work, maybe it's an enhancement. So let me just take a rudimentary example. Let's say the enhancement is send out a friend request on Facebook. That's the enhancement. Let's say I'm working for Facebook. So what I'll do, I'll go sit down with an end user. I'll tell the end user to share the screen. And I'll say, hey, tell me everything that you do when you send out this friend request. So the end user would start from, I'll also say something, which is, I'll say, tell me things that you do using the application, but also tell me things that you do outside the application. Example, if the revenue goes below $10,000 per day, you have to call your reporting manager and notify your manager. Tell me that too, because we might want to automate that. So they'll start telling all their stories, and it's a very laid back environment because it's just me and the end user on the call, and all the end user knows is I'm an IT guy. He doesn't know that he's a business analyst. People might judge me if I don't have that domain knowledge. People might judge me for not having adequate skill set. There's none of that there on that call because it's a one-on-one meeting, and people who work on certain areas, they really want to talk about what they do day to day, and they don't get that opportunity. So they might take that analysis meeting as an opportunity to talk about what they do. So I really got a lot of help, and I don't want anybody else on that meeting, because sometimes my project manager wanted to push himself in. I was in good terms with him, so I will somehow try to kind of edge him out. And then sometimes the business liaison or the director level staffs, interestingly, they wanted to come to that meeting. And I'll say, hey, there's the requirements meeting. I'm not going to gather requirements. Don't worry about it. I just want to learn how the current process works so that we can save time. I'm going to save time for you. So somehow I'll just try to make sure that it's a one-on-one call. And the reason why I do that is because sometimes when I have other people on that call, maybe a developer or a project manager or somebody from program, they might say things like, hey, that's basic. Why are you even asking that? I mean, if not that exact statement, they'll say something like, hey, we can discuss this in another meeting. Or sometimes they'll take that meeting over and they might have some questions that they want to ask that end user. Or in some occasions, the end user will be reluctant to talk freely because, hey, my reporting manager is on the call. I don't want to talk, and I don't want to talk about the areas where I circumvent and not use the application. I've seen that happen. They just write stuff down on paper and they don't enter it on the UI because they don't want to do it when they are actually doing that business process flow. So that never comes up because the reporting, some director level staff is there on the call. But I do get pressed. Hey, I want to come to this meeting. What is this meeting? And then I'll say, hey, look at the title. It's one-on-one active observation session. So you can't come because it's one-on-one active observation session as dictated by theory. So that's why I'm not including you. So I had my own defense mechanisms. And I tried my best not to offend anybody and not to be rude. So number one, how important is analysis, especially in the case where we don't have domain knowledge? And number two, there will be cases where, I've seen cases where I used to work for a bank, and then they said, hey, you don't get to go and talk to the end user. I never really understood that. I was like, hey, I want to talk and I want to understand how this cash processing page works. And they'll be like, no, we don't do that in here. You come to me. You go to that person, but we are not going to give you the end user, right? So that comes up a lot. Sometimes I'll still push and get the end user. I have my ways, but for that specific banking client, I couldn't do it. So how do you handle these situations? And in some cases, the manual will be there, and the manual is adequate. They'll have a manual somewhere in their enterprise portal, and that's adequate. And sometimes it might not have enough info. So how will you handle these scenarios? So, and of course, the scenario that I mentioned, somebody wants to push themselves into that meeting. So how will you politely say no? And how will you handle that analysis phase is what I'm trying to ask, and all the challenges that are associated with it. So yeah, there's a lot of...
For you. That is so awesome. I was just like, yep, that happens. Yep, that happens. So yes, excellent. Hopefully if so, first one, so yes, analysis is the most important. I think another key element of a business analyst is also a teacher. Mm-hmm. And so being able to, let me just pause for a second. If your audience goes in and looks at the BA BOK and they in planning, one of them is the BA approach, your business analysis approach. And when I introduced this to the BAs that I was working with, and I said, I want them to understand and have their approach. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing. And does it have to be a document? And I was like, no. The approach is just, how are you going to approach this assignment? And so in the example that you just shared, you were doing a one-on-one text observational meeting. That was your first approach. You just wanted to talk to the person, see what they did, ask them what they do inside and out of the system. And so that was your approach. And then I'm sure you were going to go on to more detailed requirements and things like that. And you've got these people where, people want to condense time and they want to save time and all these other sorts of things. And so you handled it, I think, in an exceptional way with, this is just for this meeting so I can learn the system and understand with them and build a relationship with them. You shared that. There will be time later for questions from the development team, or if the director or the manager or the leader, they're probably just like, oh, I don't know what they're doing. And they want to learn, in which case you could have said, or maybe you did say, that this is going to be really detailed. And in order for you to better understand, give me some time and I'll be summarizing the process, or I'll be summarizing what we want to do. And then I'll give you a readout. So acknowledge that they want to hear and they want to learn, explain to them what you're doing, and then follow up that, yeah, you will have your chance to be heard. You're going to meet with the development team, or I think it is good, especially in Agile, where the development engineer and the end user and quality is all together, because that's the nature of being Agile. And then, the directors, and yes, you want them to be involved. You want them to know what's going on, but not everybody needs to be involved in those little nitty gritty specific things. And that's where you as a business analyst can be that teacher, explaining the process, why you're doing what you're doing. And just be confident in what you're doing. It's like I said before, there's no one right way to do it. And just like we as business analysts go to our end users, why are you doing that? And then they explain. You might get from a director or a development engineer, why'd you ask that question? You just provide the answer. So you should have, be prepared with, why are you asking the questions? What are you trying to discover? How are you going to draw the connection between the different questions and the answers that you get? And then just be able to explain that to people.
Understood. Yeah, that's a great answer. So that is something that I do. That's what I really specialized in. So the way I do it, I go talk to my end user, come up with a business process flow. I'll set up another meeting, and I'll share my screen and I'll explain the business process flow. I'll also tell them, hey, if you feel there's any mistake in this Microsoft Visio diagram, let me know. Feel free to stop. And then the third session, I'll again go back, make rectifications. I'll set up a third session, and then I'll explain everything. I'll again share my screen and I'll go over the flow, and they'll be like, nice. And I'll take that business process flow over to the requirements meeting. And then when somebody is saying something, when the director is saying something, or some high-level staff is saying something, and I'll say something, hey, I think That's a great answer, but then the end user is also doing this and this, which you might not be aware of, or you are aware of already. What do you think about this? And they are like, oh, you know this. But what they don't know is I did all this background work and I look really smart.
Yes.
Everybody thinks that.
Yes, so, that's right.
So that really that did give a boost to my image. So the final question is, so this is something that I struggled with. So when I started out as a business analyst, I didn't know all these team dynamics and how ego plays out and how to deal with people who have decades of experience. And I didn't have that much experience. So there's a lot of adrenaline in me and I really wanted to be the guy or whatever that means. So I really struggled with handling the development and testing team. And I still remember, for some reason, my manager did not want to say something to the development team. I think my manager wanted to tell me, my manager wanted me to tell the development team to speed up the development, which is a cardinal sin for anybody to go and say that. Right. And especially if they are a bunch of folks who have 3.5 decades of experience. And so I just set up a meeting and I just casually brought this up and everybody got offended. And I actually worked with that same organization for little more than 2 years and they never forgave me. They didn't forgive me.
Wow.
And they didn't like that I brought that up. And that was like my second or third month on the job and I brought this up and we never, I was not able to build that relationship back up. So something that I learned right from the get-go is that you should be in good terms with everybody and never shift lanes without switching on the indicator, and try your best not to shift lanes. And I should handle people appropriately and I should be able to interact and coordinate with people efficiently and be in good terms with them, right? So this is something that I learned and I messed up initially and then I learned through all my mistakes. And right now, as a project manager, I was in a daily stand-up call. I think this was last week. And I think somebody was joking and somebody jokingly said, hey, YG gave us a very hard time. And the developer suddenly said, some other developer said, he's the nicest person that I know. I don't think he'll give a hard time. And they were just joking about this. And I felt, oh my God, so that's my image. So I'm this nice guy now. So I've learned my lessons and I'm having a good relationship with my team. So my question to you is, how important is dealing with people for a business analyst? We deal with the high level executive level or director level clients. At the same time, we also need to relay the business requirements to the development team. And we need to, again, handle personalities, explain things to them. So I've seen cases where, hey, that requirement is wrong and we can't code this. And the requirement can never be wrong. We can either provide a solution or choose not to, but the requirement itself, by principle, it cannot be wrong. So I've had those conversations with my developers. So how important is dealing with people as a business analyst? And when we gather requirements, we might be faced with some strong personalities. How do we deal with them? And this also goes for the technical team. And tell me about some challenges that you have faced in your tenure. That's the question.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you 100%. Communication and interpersonal relationships is critical. And the examples that you shared, and unfortunately, the way you learn is by making mistakes. So that's the way I had to learn as well. You can read books, you can listen to podcasts, and give you like the principles, and yet Every single human being is going to be different. And I think for me, what has helped me be successful in developing these relationships that are productive is I always remind myself that every person has something of value to bring, whether it's in general to the world or to this specific project and every place in between. And the other aspect and mindset that I have as a business analyst and in my entire career is I'm a servant to them. And it's not to put me in a lower place. Like, when somebody's got 25 years of experience and I had 2, I definitely am lower. But in the servant space, what I mean is I'm there to help them. A business analyst's role is to help and support. We don't lead. I mean, we're not like, come on, follow me. The business has the answers and you're there to help dig them out. Showing respect for people, like the individuals, the directors and they put their time in, they maybe have the education, and yet that doesn't give them a pass to be rude. Everybody brushes their teeth, everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time. So I can honestly say over the course of my career, there are 2 individuals that I haven't been able to build an effective working relationship. Now there's differing degrees. I mean, some relationships are like amazing where, Connie's awesome. And whatever Connie needs, just do whatever she says. And that, builds up over time. And some of them are just like, we have a working relationship and it's effective. And then there's two people that I haven't been able to engage with. And I think it comes down to respect and getting to know the person as a person. So just acknowledging that something might have happened on the way to work this morning. Something might have happened last night in their personal life. Now, we don't need to get into all the details. There's privacy and I totally understand all of that. And I don't ever want to cross those boundaries. One of the examples I was going to share with you was I worked with an individual who had been at this organization for 42 years, and we were replacing the main system that he had used. And I was told by the product manager and by 3 other people on the team, I'm just going to say his name is Larry. Larry will never cooperate with you. He's been here so long. He's stuck in his ways. He's not open to technology. He's not open to change. And I was like, okay. But I needed Larry because he knew the process. And if you've ever worked with state government, like they function on strict process. And so I was like, I need Larry to play in this project. And so I did exactly what you did. I did a one-on-one and I sat down and I was going to ask Larry about, show me the system and how it goes through. And I happened to see a picture of him and a little girl. Now I didn't want to assume, I didn't know if it's a daughter or granddaughter or just a friend. And so I just was looking around his cube, and if you can do that, or if we're in the world of, wire or Zoom calls, it's kind of hard if people aren't showing their background. But anyway, like a logo on a shirt or whatever. I'm like, who's that beautiful little girl? And then he's like, oh, that's my granddaughter. And his face lit up. And, so we just had a little chat, and I got to know, he talked to me about his granddaughter and where that event was. I'm like, okay, can we show me about this? And that little connection just opened the door. And then in meetings, he was quiet. He looked, like this. And I'd be like, Larry, do you have anything? Am I doing this right? Is this part of the process okay? And he's like, well, I really think if we're going to improve this process, we should do X. And people went, what? He's talking about improving the process? And he became like the best tester. He was involved. He was vocal. But people had assumed that he was not willing to, because nobody took the time to ask, for example. And so he was one of my best, one of the best people I ever worked with. He was amazing. Another one with an example with a director level person I was running. This was a workshop. So I had individuals, And I opened it up of like, if you want to come in and watch the process design or process workshop that will lead into requirements, feel free to come in. And we had set ground rules with this team that during the session, all laptops were going to be closed because I wanted people to focus on the conversation. And we started on time. That was another thing. We started our meetings on time. Well, this director came in 5 minutes late, and he sits down and he opens his laptop. He goes, "Okay, where are we?" And I was like, we've started, we're right here. So I just like, not rehashing everything, but it's like, this is where we are. And then he opens up his newspaper, and I'm like, and then like you said, people stopped talking because the director was in the room. And so I said, we worked a little while longer, and then I'm like, let's just take a 5-minute break. And I talked to the director outside one-on-one, and I explained, because he hadn't been to any of their sessions, we have ground rules, laptops are down, everybody's focused, we start on time. And another ground rule that these people had put in place, which they came up with these rules, there's no titles. Everybody's voice is equal. So he came in dominating, like, because I'm the director. And so I said, if you're going to participate, you need to be with everybody. And he's like, oh, okay. I wasn't aware. And so it was just an education, but it was respectful, acknowledging what he was. But I also was that teacher and explainer of the process that we were going through. So those were two instances that I thought of different perceptions and challenges that I had with individuals.
Yeah, that's really a great answer, and it's good. And we all face.
Yeah, I was just going to put the one other thing in. So when I meet, especially as a consultant, if you're a consultant, and if you're a direct employee, because it happens as well, you go into an organization and you'll talk to somebody, they'll be like, "Oh, don't talk to YG, man. He just demands everything, and he asks so many questions." I take that information, I say, "Thank you." And I put that piece of information in my back pocket. And then I'm like, "Hey, YG, I'm Connie. How can I, and just, I build my relationship based on my experience and interaction with people. I hear what other people have said, and yet it's my relationship with the individual. So other people might not understand or have something like with Larry. Larry's crabby. He never, thank you, back pocket. And I just develop my own relationship.
Yeah, that's true. Especially the last point, because there's so many instances where we form opinions about people based on what we hear. And we don't know saying that. There might be some vested interest or their own agenda. Or maybe it's just the context, the scenario or the context is that way, and they happen to be the bad person in that context. But then it's very important to have an open mind, and it's very important to have that good relationship and an intelligence that's not sullied by memory when we approach.
Yes.
So that's a great answer.
Yes. And I don't want to minimize, these relationships, the director conversation was that just happened in a one-time thing. The relationship to get Larry to be really a participant takes time. And like those two individuals, I tried all sorts of things. I was like, being very honest, I'm like, we're not gelling here. You have information that I need to support this project. What can we do? And so you have to keep trying different things to make that connection always. And I would just always keep in mind, this person has value, respect them as a human, be kind to them, be humble, and tell them that you're trying to support them and you're trying to help them. And there are just some people that it just won't work. So.
Yeah, when I started out as a BA, or when I was aspiring to become a BA, I was thinking, okay, what skill set should I learn? Should I learn SQL? Should I learn how to write good requirements, user stories, how to talk to people properly, how to get the message across, how to work on my English? And these were all the things that came to my mind when I was working as an apprentice, and when I was in training, or when I was training myself before I got this job. But then once I got the job, in the first couple of months, I got to know that what's even more important, if not equally important, is how to deal with people. And that applies for, and then over a period of time, I'm kind of inclining towards maybe it's more important to deal with people. The skill set can come because
Yes.
you have set number of skill set. With reference to that, you can learn other skill sets faster and better and more efficiently. But
Yes.
then dealing with people is kind of, I'm inclining more towards, I think dealing with people and people management is more important than skill set, especially in today's day and age where that skill set could expire because there's so many other things coming up. I think that's how the 21st century is going to be, right? So that I read that book, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by
Interesting.
I think it's an Israeli author. I'm not able to remember his name, Yuval Noah Harari or something. I might be pronouncing it wrong. I'll just display that here. But yeah, that book was riddled with the same concept over and over again. Skill set, at least in the 21st century, the skill set is going to expire, and we should be open to learning new skills. And something that is not going to expire is how to deal with people. That's not going to get outdated no matter what.
Exactly. Yeah. And the tools change and there's more software that comes out. We talked about Tableau and Power BI. Well, how many other are there? And they're going to keep building new ones and consolidating ones. And yeah, communication is definitely of a business analyst. And it just comes with time. And yes, there's concepts, active listening. The one thing I wanted to say also, like with the development team, those people I don't ever pretend to want to know what they do. That's like the magic in the black box. And so again, approaching them, I don't need to know how they put all the bits and bytes and the code things together, but I'll ask them, I said, in my mind, if I put it in this field, then I should be able to look it up in a database, right? Under the same, they're like, no, because it's on the screen, it says this, but in our database, it will say this. And I'm like, oh, so that's why. And again, just have conversations with them, be inquisitive, be curious, you don't have to understand all the details. That's their profession. That's their role. That's their expertise. But again, showing them the respect for the education and the experience and the knowledge that they have.
Sounds good. On that note, I think we can adjourn our meeting, and thanks for your time. And
oh my gosh, it's been my pleasure. This has been so fun.
Yeah, and the one, maybe it's been over an hour and time just went quick. So
I know. I love business analysis. I could talk about it for days, seriously, because I love it. It's so much fun. I think this profession is not going to go away.
Yes.
The principles, again, in the discipline, the principles, there's planning, there's requirements, analysis, design, development, testing, release, and maintenance. That's all going to stay there. How you write a requirement, whether it's, in a Word document or in a tool or on a napkin, is it a sentence? Is it a couple words? Those things can ebb and flow. But yeah, the discipline is not going away. I was just going to say, like, one more little tip for people. When you are speaking, and especially when you're writing your requirements, I always wrote in a way using terminology and language so that I understood it fully. I didn't just take what people told me as a requirement and write it down. I put it in the picture, like, where in the process, okay, this is here. So how can I explain it so that I fully understand it? So I could explain the process, which includes all the requirements, by just looking at the picture and telling a story. So there's also a storytelling aspect in the communication. It's not just reading words, it's really understanding what the process is and being able to communicate that. So yeah. I hope that's helpful. I wanted to sneak that in at the end.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And yeah, I mean, this call has been very insightful. I got to learn a lot.
Excellent.
So yeah.